Welcome to Dental Momentum, the podcast dedicated to lively discussions on business and financial strategies tailored for dental business owners. At Duckett Ladd, we're committed to transforming your business journey and supporting you at every stage. Join us as we delve into the keys to long-term practice success, from cutting-edge accounting and strategic tax planning to personalized business strategies. Together, let's propel your dental practice forward with unstoppable momentum.
Hey man, that was a fun one. I think it's our first, group practice space really unpacking from the specialty side. So it's always good to kind of see all aspects of dentistry, right? Not just GP and everything else, but ortho as well.
Yeah, I think we kind of opened it up to ortho with a office that has PDO as well. And man, just some good stuff in there. I was just thinking about it as we got off here. I really like his mindset of just focusing on the journey, instead of getting so fixated on the destination. I mean, that's a great message, I think, because it's so easy to get bogged down, isn't it? As you're doing these things.
100%. If you're always focused on the end goal, I agree. But one key point he brought up that I jumped in on or kind of hit my radar is you think about it, like this is going to get a little sentimental here maybe, but like family, he said that, man, we're growing. I don't want to outgrow this family feel that we have. Yeah. And you can just tell how much passion he has for his patients, of course, but I mean, his team, his doctors and his team, and how he's trying to grow and keep that family vibe. So he's definitely doing it the right way, in my opinion. So guys, you guys are going to enjoy this. Diving into the ortho space here. Dr.TC Hardy with Hardy Dental Group. Enjoy. Dr. Hardy, how's it going, man?
Hey, doing great. How about you guys?
Man, can't complain. I just wanted to start out, maybe the first question we'll kind of dive in on, and then I want to really go back and start unpacking your journey. But, we've met a handful of dentists that kind of work with their spouse in the practice, whether that spouse is another doctor or maybe they take, ownership or office manager roles in the office. But just jump in. I mean, working with your wife, everything like that. How is it? How do you like it? Give me some feedback.
We really lucked out. It's been a really good experience for us overall. I'm an orthodontist. My wife is a pediatric dentist, so it is different specialties. When we're in the workplace, we really do try and treat it like a partnership between two doctors, where we do have specific roles that we try and maintain. And I think with that separate delineation, it has been where we've been able to function very successfully, both in the workplace and then at home. It is where I do a lot of the business management and practice management. She is definitely a team member and fellow partner that we tag team a lot of questions on and have a lot of group discussions on for the group practice on how we're accelerating. But it is where with her being a pediatric specialist, it's also helped with that delineation. And so she has her pediatric side. She focuses on the pediatric clinical aspects, her pediatric dental team, her pediatric administrative team, and just really makes sure that she's handling that aspect to the best that she can. And for the most part, I don't really get involved with it. And then I handle the orthodontic portion of it and make sure my orthodontic team is doing really good. My orthodontic administrative team is doing really well. And then when we get into the bigger picture of the group practice, I would say that is where I have taken the lead. And so it usually is where I'm leading a lot of the goals, leading a lot of the discussions with her as my dental partner and home partner, leading a lot of the questions with our operations manager, leading a lot of the discussions with our operation manager on the direction we'd like to go, on how overhead is going, on different projects we want to pursue. But it's been a really great setup with my wife. We've really lucked out, and I think.
Do you ever take off the work hat though when you go home, or is it work at the dinner table as well, or how's that work?
There's a fair amount, but not exclusively, and I think it is where we've never personally made a hard, fast rule of, right, at work, we're going to only be talking about work, and
Yeah.
then at home, we're only talking about home. And so, during the workday, we'll, chat about our kids, different projects, different activities they're doing with school. We have a little one that's 3 years old, and so occasionally we'll, do a FaceTime with the little kid to see how he's doing during the day. And then, at home, obviously, majority of it is focused on our kids, but if there's that random little topic that pops up about a certain office or whatever it might be, there isn't a hard rule for us on whether it's appropriate or not to talk about it at home. But I think it is where we both have the same goals and the same mindset towards um, growth and development and advancement of all aspects of our life, from family to work. And obviously, work is a significant part of it. And so we don't really shy away from discussing it if and when needed.
I think that's a great way to put it. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that they have alignment in their work goals, their life goals. That would indicate to us that you've been very intentional in that, and recognize that it could kind of be there could be some pitfalls in there if you don't watch out. And I think I love the way you put that, because I actually work with my wife. She's the controller here, and we had to set some boundaries too, and try to be very intentional. I go back, our relationship, we actually met in college, both accounting students. Did you meet your wife in dental school then, or was that
Yeah,
after?
we met in dental school. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so let's just kick off there, because I don't know in this series if we've had a specialist. So walk us through kind of your dental school journey, and really what drew you towards orthodontics.
Ooh. I mean, orthodontics was a goal and aspiration of mine since middle school when I went through orthodontics. And so it was just a small idea in the back of my head. Obviously, I was very young, so it wasn't like I was just gung-ho and super set on doing this. But then as I got through college, that is where the orthodontist that did my orthodontic care growing up, I reached out to see if I could get a part-time summer job. A super awesome guy, very caring, very supportive. And so he did let me come on. I started as a steri tech, and for the most part did that throughout most of my undergraduate career, while I did a couple other part-time jobs. And during that undergraduate time with him and seeing the office, that's where it really drove it home for me that this was something that I did want to pursue. And so I did have that goal and ambition of being a specialist even before getting into dental school. And so then when dental school came about, it definitely where I had that goal and ambition to get into a specialty program. And so a lot of hard work, a lot of focus, a lot of intention with studies and making sure I got good grades. And then, well, sorry about that.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, sorry. Office is on a timer, and I guess I was not moving
Energy
very much.
saving, yeah.
But yeah, during dental school, very, very lucky to have met my wife, and we started dating. It worked out very well. She was a couple years younger than I. I was her teaching assistant. That's how we met.
There you go.
Tufts University, yep. Tufts University has their fourth year students really get involved with some of the first and second years on some of the education. It was very valuable, just even as a fourth year dental student, to go in and help teach younger students. It gives you a better thinking process about what's actually happening in the mouth and the different procedures you're doing. But was able to meet her, and she was a few years behind me, so just timing wise and everything, just really blessed and worked out well. I got into an orthodontic program and was able to get into Tufts University, where she was going through her dental school program. We both graduated the same year, 2012. So it was a great opportunity for us to just be able to move anywhere it wasn't where she was still going through school, and I was stuck in Boston. And so from there, she applied to pediatric programs and was able to get into a pediatric residency program in New York. Went down that way, associated for a little bit, and after associating for that little bit of time, it is where I definitely got that drive to do something more. Wasn't particularly set on any general location, so started searching around everywhere. And
real quick, I'm going to jump in there on when you were associating. Yeah. How'd you like that? Did you like the associating part of it, or like were you working there and there were things happening? You're like, man, I'd really like to just go get my own practice. Like, how was that working out?
It wasn't bad, but I definitely felt some ambition to do more.
Yeah.
Hindsight, ownership is a lot of work.
Sure.
And I think a lot of young docs fresh out do have those goals and ambitions, and it's something you should follow for sure. But it is where there should be an appreciation for that associateship. Mm-hmm. There should be an appreciation of the education you can get out of that associateship that I don't think I took advantage of because I was so focused and set on, oh, there's more out there. But I learned a fair amount, and then in hindsight, there's actually tons of stuff I learned from that associateship on practice management, interacting with staff, a lot of things that I didn't even really realize I was learning. And just, 5-10 years later, that's like, oh, okay, that makes sense why this doctor owner was doing things this certain way. But I think, to take even more advantage of it and be cognizant of all the systems, all the structures that are occurring in that associateship position, and learning why and the reasons behind that system and that structure can be very valuable while you're in that associateship that I could have taken advantage of more.
I want you to keep going on that thread, because I think where you were going was, you were in Boston, but when you kind of started looking out at ownership, you realized that you weren't necessarily bound to any location. Am I kind of reading the tea leaves right? Is that kind of the mindset you had when you started looking for your practice?
Yeah, we looked all over the U.S. To an extent, and just tried to look for different locations my wife and I would enjoy practicing at, different cities that we'd enjoy living in. And it definitely realized there's no real special location, there's no real special office. And so after a bit of hunting, it is where we decided on Colorado. We knew there was a lot of growth and new families moving in there. My family is originally from there, and so it was just an easy additional comfort to say, hey, let's move to the Colorado area. And so started looking for practices out there. And for an orthodontic specialist, it's not like a practice becomes available every day. Yeah. I would say on average 2 to 3, maybe 2 to 4 practices become available a year in Colorado, if that. And so there was just, 1 or 2 that were available at the time, and really only one that seemed worthwhile and worth pursuing when I was looking. And very, very luckily it worked out to where the selling doctor appreciated me and appreciated what my goals and ambitions were for the practice, and we were able to connect and make a good sale and a good purchase. She's been a great mentor, and just a really great doctor that helped get me started for sure.
So walk us through that. Like, how big was the practice, that first practice that you bought, and like the doctor stay around, you said, and mentored you and that sort of thing?
Yeah. Medium-sized office from an orthodontic standpoint. She had a group practice. This was the newest location. She had actually just opened it in 2011, and I took it over late 2013. So it was only open for about 2.5 years, but she had an associate in there. Um, they were working a couple days a week, but a pretty full schedule those
Hmm.
few days a week. And so then when I took it over as my only location, my only gig, and so it actually was where restructured the staff uh, and gave fewer staff more hours and expanded my clinical hours there and clinical availability to, hopefully allow it to grow a bit better, give patients, a quicker and faster opportunity to get into the practice with orthodontics as fairly elective. In general, you want to be moving pretty quickly with the patient through that onboarding process to capture them when the motivation is high. And so having that availability there was advantageous. And then those first couple of years from 2013 to 2015 really grew it and took it off. We over the 2 to 3 years grew it by 170%.
Wow, good for you.
2013 to 2015, and I'll say that it was still just again kind of on an upward swing because it was only 2011 when it first opened, but it
So
was
were you kind of sitting back and like, man, this is easy. This practice ownership is a breeze, man. We're not
yes,
far from it.
very much so, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything was expanding, everything was going well. The previous owner had a fair number of systems in place that honestly, as a young associate, I didn't truly understand all of it. I knew why and what we were supposed to be doing with running AR reports, looking at P&Ls and different things, but I didn't really have that meat and bone behind all the different various reports and different business management things that needed to be done. But it really is easy to to stick your head out the door and say, hey Susie, can you run this report and see how things are going. And so definitely where I thought running an office was easy and piece of cake and anyone can do it. And after those few years of my practice ownership, my wife was associating, and so that's where we're like, all right, let's get the PETA Ortho office started and get it humming along. And as we went through that process, I was working with just a small-time local consultant, but she was consulting with an orthodontist in the Denver metro area. Our first practice was up in Fort Collins, and our PETA Ortho was a northern suburb of Erie. But this orthodontist down in the Denver metro area was consulting with the consultant we were using, and she was getting ready to sell. And so our consultant said, hey, why don't you take a look at this office? I'm working with both of you. I know the two offices well. I'll help you out. So went from 1 to 3 pretty willy-nilly, saying, hey, running a dental office is easy. Look at all this growth I had with number 1. Let's go do it. And that was in 2016. 2016, I think we just lucked out with a lot of things moving along that were already in place to still have a very good, successful year. And very fortunately, we never, from year to year, we always grew. But 2017, after having the 3 locations for a year, that's where we really started to see what true business management is with a group practice, and where if there aren't appropriate systems and structures and personnel in place, that it can get very, very, very stressful, very difficult. And so we learned trial by fire for sure over the next couple of years of what it truly meant to be a group practice owner. And then, after about 2 years of a lot of heartache, a lot of stresses, a lot of education, a lot of education being in the hot seat, that things started to flourish with all those stresses and that hard work to make sure we got into system and a structure in a place where a group practice can actually function and a group practice business owner can be happy and flourish and help the employees, help the group, help the associate docs advance.
So I think when we talk to clients, a lot of times that 3 practice, that tends to be kind of that time frame where you can only be at so many places at one time. So walk us through what were some of the cracks in the foundation you were seeing? Like what were some of the struggles that you had that were kind of manifesting themselves at that time?
I think jumping from 1 to 3 so quickly led to a lot of additional overhead that very luckily the practice acquisition with that doctor down in Denver definitely helped keep that production flowing to control the overhead. But it is very easy that when you expand and add all these things, that overhead just compounds significantly.
Yeah.
And tying that into goals and aspirations of wanting to provide certain services for patients, wanting to provide certain things for your employees, wanting to have certain personnel in place at each location, it can get very large very quickly. And then very, very importantly is you think you might have a lot of systems and structure in place at your single your single office location, but until you really are absent and are trying to let an office run independently from you, then you pretty quickly realize there's a lot more that needs to be in place to make sure that an office can run independently without you being there guiding and directing. And so there were those few years where, I mean, it was just week after week, month after month, where a new issue would arise, and it's all right, we got to set up and figure out a system and a protocol on how we're going to handle this.
So going back to how you felt after 2 years of the first practice, like, man, this is easy. Now you got 3, you're like, damn, this is hard, right?
Yes, very, very hard. Yep. Yep.
We talk to group practice owners all the time. Like, you know, you've got the really good practice. Let's use yours. Here's an example. Your first one that you grew by 170% or whatever you said. And it's like, man, I figured this out. I got this in place. This is a really broad question, but why is it so hard to replicate that one practice across, let's say your new, pediatric ortho and then this new one you bought? Why is it so hard to why can't you just copy and paste? It's easy said than done, but why is it hard to do?
Because there's a lot of things that happen in a single office location that aren't necessarily written out and formalized, that you just won't ever really think about it or come across it until you are an absentee owner. And so that's a fair amount of it. You're going to have different staff. And so kind of correlated with all those things that aren't really written out, the certain staff that you have in your primary location are probably doing a lot of small little things that they personally feel important or that they've come across that they keep an eye on, that a different employee might not be doing so. And so, then if you don't have that system or structure in place for how a phone call is tracked, how different scheduling processes are handled, how to handle difficult parents, just all those little things start to show themselves when you move into that second location. And so, as you're trying to grow and expand, especially in those early stages, you don't have the means, the manpower, the financial power to just really set up a strong training process for those new employees either. Because when you have one location with, 7, 8, 9 employees or whatever it might be, to add that 10th employee, that's a 10% change plus in staff overhead. And so then to say, hey, I'm going to sit there and shell out 3, 4, 5 months worth of staff overhead just to train this person before they even actually start doing something, that's a pretty big burden. Now that, we're, 35, 40 employees, hey, that additional employee, yeah, that's a bit extra overhead, but it honestly is, barely noticeable when I'm looking at the payroll. And so then to be able to give them proper training, have additional team members that can give them that extra support, give that office the extra support that's needed to make sure it's functional, does become easier as you scale. And so those first couple of years and those first couple of offices, all those little things have a very large impact on your bottom line, and so then you're just making decisions on what you can handle.
Yeah, I kind of want to think through this move, because this was kind of one of those big inflection points when you went from 1 to 2 to 3. At that point, it's 2 ortho, 1 pediatrics. Is that right?
Yeah, for offices, 2 orthodontic offices, and then 1 pedo ortho.
Yeah.
I did have an associate with me when we took on that office down in the Denver metro area.
So talk to us a little bit about, because it sounds like it was a combo office. How different was it to incorporate a totally different specialty than ortho? Was it pretty much, could a lot of the processes transfer over, or did you really have to kind of reinvent the wheel in a lot of ways?
We had to reinvent the wheel quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is because orthodontics as a specialty is so different than a lot of, pretty much all the other dental specialties and general dentistry. I mean, so much of dentistry is, 1 to 2 procedures, 1 to 2 visits. The patient's done, they're paid in full. You're working with insurance and just getting it squared away. With orthodontics, it's a long continual process.
Yeah.
As a pretty strong standard within the orthodontic community, majority of orthodontists offer extended payment plans just in office, not even through a third-party vendor.
Yeah.
And so you're producing $5,000, but you're collecting $300-$400 down, $500 down, and then $200 a month over the next 2 years. Yeah. And so then the build-up for the collections takes quite a while as well. For an orthodontic office, I mean, honestly, a lot of growth and success just comes down to the number of starts you have in a month. There's a lot of things that go behind it, with managing pending patients and, making sure phone calls are handled, all that good stuff. But in the end, is how many starts did you get over the month? And with pediatrics, and I think, from my understanding, a lot of correlation with general dentistry. It's getting patients in for their exams, but then looking and seeing what you can produce from that actual patient, what's needed for that patient. But then on the tail end, that next visit, really making sure that the reappointment rate is high. It is quite a bit of a different mindset.
And I guess that's the question. Did you spearhead that then, or like administratively, were you the one in charge of both, or did you have your wife kind of run the pediatric side, or how did you build in proper infrastructure to be able to do both? Because they are very different clinically, as you mentioned.
Yeah. We got a decent foundation from our consultant to at least get us going.
Yeah.
Unless you have a really strong business background or you spend quite a few years in your associateship learning the administrative side of dentistry, dental school really doesn't teach you that much.
Yeah.
And so if you're a doctor that's going straight through from undergraduate to dental school to, just 1 or 2 years of an associateship into practice ownership, there's going to be a lot you don't know, and you're going to miss out on a lot. And so we're having a consultant for us at that young age was very, very valuable. She gave us a decent foundation. It was just a foundation, but she definitely helped us out with formulating schedule templates, looking at different things that a pediatric dentist would need to look at compared to orthodontics as far as KPIs and, when we can handle different employees and different things like that. She was a help with that. Definitely didn't have all the answers by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely gave us a good foundation. And then that was where we were able to build it up from there.
So after you got your third one, you bought that down in Denver or whatever, when did you catch your breath and be like, okay, let's keep moving forward with more? Like, how did that work? Like, what did you ever consider, like, hey, these three are good, or what went through your head?
I never had an end goal of this is what I want. And I don't know if that's really realistic for a lot of people to think that way. I think there's always growth and development and advancement that someone should be trying to strive for, right? I think it's, the journey, not necessarily the destination. And the journey could be, one practice and just growing that and expanding that. But it took us 3 years. 2016 hummed along really well just because we were lucky. 2017 is where things, really hit the fan. And then it took us 2 years of, just week after week, month after month, having some issue arise and figuring out a process and structure to control that issue. But after 2 years of really working through that, 2019 is where things started to hum along and we could take a breath. We could see light at the end of the tunnel. But it wasn't until middle of 2020 that we really started seriously looking at expanding and growing again. And then we didn't open up our fourth location until February of 21.
Yeah.
So during that process, was there ever a point where you thought either by intentionality or necessity that you were going to step away from the chair and focus more on the business aspect of your portfolio? Or was that later?
That was still a little bit later. Very fortunately, with orthodontics as a specialty, I'm not using my hands as much as other specialists, and so I was very lucky to be able to still do a fair amount of administrative work even during a clinical day, and still be able to, have a full clinical schedule with, 40-50% of my day being able to be in front of the computer working on emails, working on protocols, whatever it might be. Orthodontics is tough because it's a lot of up and down. And so, all of a sudden that 5-sentence email would take a half hour just to get done. That's very stressful and can wear on you quite a bit. But as a younger doctor and still a younger growing office and growing group, I was still able to do that for quite a bit. And I think it is true. I can't remember who told me first, but in general, somewhere around Office 5 is where a lot of people have seen a lot of doctors start to step away from the chair.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel that's true as well, as far as my capacity on what I can handle and how I can function and make sure everything stays in line. That even with 4 practices, I was still doing pretty solid. But bringing on our 5th location in 2023, that's where I did feel like, okay, I don't have enough time to do all my administrative tasks, see
Yeah.
the patients, and get everything done. And so I'm kind of in a transition period, but I'm doing two to three clinical days a week still. Very fortunately, I'm the doc that is uh, the clinical provider at the startups. And so as we get going, it's a lighter schedule. So I kind of halfway count it as a administrative day, even when I'm in clinic.
Interesting. So that's your strategy is you kind of, was the fourth and fifth one, were they acquisitions or were they startups?
Fourth was a startup.
Mm-hmm.
Fifth was an acquisition.
Okay. So those
Both
startups,
ortho.
you basically move yourself into that building, if you will, and like you are the doc that's getting this thing going, which makes sense. I mean, you've been doing it the longest.
Yeah, been doing it the longest. As of now, I just have doctors as associates, and they're amazing docs. I really lucked out with the associates I have. But it is where, as a business owner, your goals and ambitions are a little bit different. And so to be able to be the doc getting the startup going, be the one getting out there, visiting the other doctors in the area, working on the referral sources, you know, just, logically speaking, there's going to be a little bit of a stronger motivation and stronger mindset in making sure that location's successful than what an associate would. So
That, as I'm thinking through, I actually had this question back when you first moved to Colorado. I was trying to think through, it didn't really work into the conversation, but with the ortho being such a good chunk of the new patients are from referrals, it is getting out, networking, getting to know other doctors, general dentists, and so forth. When you look at your role as, let's put the two hats on, one is a doctor and one of them is more, say, CEO, do you feel that like the brand building, the relationship building, the network building, referral building, is that a doctor responsibility or is that a CEO responsibility in your mind?
I feel it's a CEO responsibility and not necessarily boots on the ground. But I do feel associate doctors definitely have a very strong and personal role within the practice as the provider. At least how our group is set up currently, and it's always something where, I'm trying to grow and advance and better our group for better employee satisfaction, better patient satisfaction, and better associate satisfaction as well. But it is where an associate is an employee and their goals and ambitions as a whole, I feel are very similar to an office manager, to even a dental assistant, as far as what they want to get out of their work. And so to rely on a doctor to rely on an associate employee to build that brand and make sure that presence is what you want it is, I think, a very tall request. I think there are associates out there that do have that goal and ambition to do that, but I don't think it should be expected. And so I do think it falls on the CEO side because in the end it's a business.
Yeah.
And it is where the C-suite should be there to develop that company, develop that brand, and develop the future strategy of where that company is going.
And to give the team members the boots on the ground, quote unquote, the tools to be able to execute what you're trying to do in that regard. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
So
and having appropriate expectations behind that. I think something that happens a lot is, especially when you're going from one location to two, or just in those earlier stages in careers, is that some docs, some owners can get frustrated that an employee is not putting the same motivation, ambition, and goals into the development as the owner is. And so I think it is setting up a growth and development process and marketing goals for your employees that align with what their employment is and what their position is, and making sure that those expectations are appropriate for what that role is too.
So fast forward to now, Dr. Hardy, what's your portfolio of practices look like today?
So that acquisition in 2023 was one of our bigger, most recent advancements, and it was during that process that I was looking at doing some de novos, but kind of put those on the back burner when this practice acquisition opportunity became available. But that practice acquisition was number 5, and then we just started number 6 in September, and then number 7 should be opening up in February of 2025.
Wow. So both 6 and 7 are de novos, they're startups.
Yeah, both 6 and 7 are de novo startups. I was going to say, as you continue to grow, you start to develop a lot of strong systems and structures. And so acquiring an office starts to become a little bit different. And again, I'm learning so much as I grow and as we advance our group. The doctor that joined our group and that I took over his practice from and the administrative side from, there was a lot of strong systems and structures that he had in place. He had everything set up to a T. Wonderful, wonderful provider, and from a business ownership perspective, did a lot of great, wonderful things for the practice. His overhead was, perfectly in line. Every employee knew exactly how to do things according to the way he had his goals, and so it's something to consider as for a doctor as they continue to advance and expand. Is all of a sudden when you have 4, 5, 6 offices, there's going to be a lot of strong systems and structures in place. And so then when you're looking at doing a de novo versus doing an acquisition, it starts to become a little bit of a different picture as far as how is that going to merge into your existing group. What are those systems and structures that the previous owner had in place that are good, that you're going to try and maintain, versus what things are you going to try and change? How are you going to change it? How fast are you going to try and change it? It's a completely different setup than a de novo.
Well, this might be a stupid question, but I'm full of stupid questions. But when you scaled, right, and you went to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, did it ever, all the additional ones after 2 were ortho only, right? Did it ever cross your mind to maybe do another pediatric ortho combo, or are some of those pediatric ortho combos?
No, majority of it's orthodontics. It was not, in the beginning, it was not a strong ambition of my wife to expand on the pediatric side. And at that stage of our career, I would say I did not have the knowledge or comfort to really expand pediatrics successfully. Like it would go well. There's a lot of things that I had already learned and a lot of things that were going well in our pedo ortho office, but in the beginning, there was a lot of things that I still needed to learn about the pediatric side. Definitely where I feel much more comfortable with it now. Our practice model is where we have a lot of very strong relationships with a lot of referral sources. And so as of now, it hasn't been a strong goal of mine to interfere with that. Our patients, from a referral standpoint, still probably make up 70 to 80% of our patient base. And then Google being, pretty much the majority of the rest of it. Patient referrals in there too. But I would say, 70% of our patient base is referred from other pediatric dentists particularly, and then a few general dentists. So as of now, I don't think it's ever out of the question. Pedo ortho is such a strong relationship. In our pedo ortho office, I do get a couple of referrals from general dentists. I don't get any referrals from a pediatric dentist. And for an orthodontist to be successful, you need to have pediatric referrals.
Yeah. So kind of starting back of your journey when you were at Tufts and you were in Boston and you kind of took the bold move or big decision to move to Colorado to, getting to 3 practices to 5 to where you are now, starting your 6th and 7th. You look back on your journey, Dr. Hardy, what would you say is the biggest piece of advice you'd give, say, that dental student or associate who has that entrepreneurial bent that kind of wants to do what you've done? What's the biggest piece of advice you'd give them?
Take your time and be diligent in your decision making and how you want to do it. You don't need to be hesitant. Still go at it and be aggressive about it, but be very diligent about it, and really make sure that not only do you have that vision of what your next step is going to be, you don't need that. Again, I'm more about the journey versus the destination. And so, know what your next step is going to be, but then really think about all those little pieces that need to occur to make that next step successful. Can be worthwhile. It can save you a fair amount of stress and headache. We jumped into it pretty quickly, and again, learned a lot. But it was a lot with, going through the heartaches of it, where not that we would ever have all the answers by any stretch of the imagination, but we could have been more diligent in saying, all right, this is going to be the next step. Let me gather more information on successful ways to go to practice number 2 that other doctors have done. What are those successful ways? How did they do it? And gather that information. I would say for the docs that are wanting to expand beyond one location, it's not going to give you all your answers, but I really would try and get that office set up so that you're going in and acting just like an associate. You're not doing anything else when you're in the office except just acting like an associate. Checking notes, doing the procedures, and then heading home at the end of the day. And then, separate yourself off to then have the administrative side and just really make sure that everything is occurring that needs to occur. And then when you do see those faults of, hey, this patient wasn't scheduled correctly, see where that issue was and really try and focus on creating systems that will allow the employee to succeed in the future. And not that you're going to ever get everything you need, but if you can get a good, strong foundation with that before you go to number 2, that hopefully some of those hiccups and heartaches won't be as significant or as difficult to handle.
Yeah. Well, let's do this, Dr. Hardy. Let's end on this, and I'm always end on a 2-part question. You said this halfway through this, something like, I never had a number in mind, right? Or, I never knew, I just kind of went with it. What's the vision like for your group now? I mean, what you've accomplished if I'm doing math right, 11 years, give or take, is, extraordinary. Getting to 7 practices, you get 6 and 7 going on right now. What's your vision for this group in general? And then, like, looking at 2025 here as we kind of begin this year, what What are you trying to knock out this year to achieve that?
Um, my vision is to try and continue to grow in a way that is where myself, my wife, employees, doctors, and patients are happy and excited. And so I think with doing 6 and 7, I could definitely potentially see that we're going to be at 7 for a little bit and continue to focus on the internal advancement of the group. But not that it's, a hard, fast, no, I'm stopping, right here. I don't know what the future would bring, but I do feel that right now where we are at with our group, that going from 3 to 4 and that range where we were still a very pretty tight-knit family to now just in the last couple of years, 5, 6, 7, very quickly we're going to become a pretty large, decent-sized group.
Yeah.
Where that family dynamic is going to change a bit. And I feel like that 7 to 15 range with offices is an area where you can't have that strong, intimate family relationship within your employees and within the group. And so my hope is to advance those relationships in a meaningful and appropriate fashion for the size that we are becoming. And so for 2025, that is definitely my goal, is that we continue to work on internal protocols, internal systems and structures and setups within the group practice to where employees and associates and patients can still have that personal connection that everyone needs to have to be happy in the workplace.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. I mean, like I said, what you've accomplished in 11 years is, I mean, it didn't come easy, right?
We're trying. It didn't come easy, and we're trying, and we still have a long, long way to go. I don't want to make it seem like we have this, great, amazing, everything's hunky-dory, look at all these offices type group practice. There's a lot of work. There's still a long way to go for us. I'm excited for the journey that we have been on. I'm excited for the future that we have. I think it'll be a great one because it is about the journey and the relationships that you have on that journey with your employees, with your spouse, with associate doctors and patients, and meeting new people and like you guys, and seeing where it takes you.
Yeah, I love that you say that quote. It's not all about the destination; it's about the journey. I have to remind myself about that all the time, right?
Yeah,
it's what you do every single day that you should enjoy, and that's the fun part of it. So, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a blast unpacking your journey, and I got a feeling maybe we have you on next year, and you might have 8 or 9 in the works. I might be wrong, but I got a feeling you might hear about a practice somewhere else and be like, let's go take a peek at that. But no, I appreciate you having on. Man. It was a blast.
No, thank you. I appreciate it as well.
You bet. Thanks, Dr. Hardy.
Yep, you guys have a good one.
See ya.